Good afternoon, everyone. This is your book lady from Maya's Amazing Bookland. Today we are gonna read another story from the Forgotten Fairy Tales, Snow White and Rose Red. About forgotten fairy tales. People have been telling each other fairy tales for thousands of years. Then, a few hundred years ago, collectors began writing the stories down. The ones that became famous were the ones that reflected the ideas of the time. The stories had patient, polite princesses such as Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. The tales with bold girls fighting their own battles were ignored. This series brings to life the stories of those forgotten brave and brilliant girls. Chapter 1: The Two Sisters. Once there were two sisters, Snow White and Rose Red. They were as different as night and day. Rose Red loved to climb trees. She was as fast as a deer and as free as a bird. She dreamed of adventure, of fighting dragons or sailing the seas. Snow White was happiest at home. She could weave baskets from rushes and carve creatures from wood. Even though the sisters were so different, they loved each other very much. Together they cared for the garden and their beautiful rose trees. In winter, they curled up by the fire and listened to their grandmother's stories. Once upon a time, one evening, as the snow fell thick and fast, there came a knock, knock, knock at the door. "Quick," said grandmother, "unlock the door. Someone must be out in the cold." Rose Red sprang up and unlocked the door. Only it wasn't a person out in the snow. It was a bear. Chapter 2: The Bear. The bear was huge, with thick fur and great with white teeth. He peered into the room. "Oh!" he cried Rose Red, jumping back in surprise. Snow White darted behind her grandmother's chair. "Don't be afraid," said the bear in a deep, growly voice. "I won't hurt you. I'm just very, very cold." "Come and warm yourself by the fire," said grandmother. The bear dropped to all fours and lumbered into the cottage. Crash went the table. Down fell the chairs. He looked so gentle. Rose Red picked up the broom and began to brush the snow from his fur. Snow White crept out from her hiding place and covered him with a blanket. Grandmother went on with her story. The bear curled up by the fire and closed his eyes. Soon the cottage was filled with the sound of the bear's rumbling snores. The next morning, Snow White opened the door and the bear lolloped away into the forest. After that, he came all through the winter and into spring. Snow White and Rose Red rode on his back, stroked the soft fur on his tummy, and tickled his whiskery nose. "I still don't believe it. A bear that can talk. Will we ever find out more about him?" The girls longed to know the bear's secret, but they didn't dare to ask. Then, one morning, the bear turned to the girls. His dark eyes were full of sadness. "Summer is coming," he said. "It's time for me to go." "Oh, please, don't leave." "I'm under a curse," said the bear. "Long ago, a wicked creature stole something precious from me. I must return to the forest to find it." But as the bear hurried out, his coat caught on the door and tore. Rose Red thought she saw shining gold beneath his fur. Before she could look again, the bear had gone, heading deeper into the forest. "I wonder if we'll ever see him again." Chapter 3: The Ungrateful Goblin. The blossom fell from the trees. The roses opened their petals. It was summer at last. They all missed the bear, but Snow White missed him most of all. "He might be in trouble. I'd do anything to help him." "Then let's go into the forest and find him," said Rose Red. So the sisters packed their bags and kissed their grandmother goodbye. Take care, stay together. They hadn't gone far when they heard a strange squawking noise. There, on the path ahead, was a goblin. He was jumping up and down, trying to free his beard from a branch. Don't just stand there, shouted the goblin. Help me! Of course we'll help, said Rose Red, and she reached into her pocket for her scissors. With a snip, snip, snip of the scissors, the goblin was free. How dare you cut off my beard, snarled the goblin. The end was the best part. He snatched up his bag, and Rose Red saw it was full of sparkling jewels. What are you looking at? Snarled the goblin. He swung the bag over his shoulders and hurried away. So ungrateful. Rose Red sighed. He didn't even say thank you. Chapter 4. The Bear's Return. That night, the sisters slept in the forest. The next morning, they headed down to the river to catch a fish for breakfast. There was the goblin again. My beard is tangled in these thorns, he shouted. Help me! Snip, snip, snip went Rose's red scissors. Fools! Screamed the goblin, his face red with rage. How dare you cut my beard? He grabbed his sack, shining with pearls, and strode away. Ruder and ruder, said Rose Red, watching him go. The sisters slept deep in the forest that night. In the morning, they set off to search for their bear once more. They crossed a bridge and came to a clearing in the trees. There, circling above them, was an eagle. It made a sudden swap to the ground. Then came a sharp, piercing cry. Rose Red and Snow White ran towards the sound and found the goblin caught in the eagle's claws. Help me! This eagle is going to fly away with me, shouted the goblin. Do something! Both girls leaped up and grabbed the goblin's feet, clinging on tight. At last, the eagle let go, and they tumbled to the ground in a heap. You are so clumsy, snapped the goblin. You should be more careful. He reached for his bulging sack, and Rose Red saw a glint of gold. As the goblin turned to go, they heard a shout. Looking up, they saw the bear in the distance. That's a thief, cried the bear. Stop him. Chapter 5. The Golden Cloak. They all raced after the goblin. Rose Red reached him first. She grabbed the goblin's beard and held fast. Then the bear raised his paws. Give me back my treasure, he growled. It's in the bag, stammered the goblin, trembling with fear. The bear tore open the bag. Out spilled shining pearls, sparkling jewels, and a golden cloak. The bear flung the cloak over his back. In a blinding flash of light, there stood a dazzling prince. The goblin let out a cry. Go away and never come back, ordered the prince. The goblin fled. Then the prince turned to the sisters. Thank you, he said. You and your grandmother kept me warm through the winter, and now you've helped me break the goblin's curse. From that day on, the sisters often visited the prince at his palace. In time, Snow White and the prince fell deeply in love and were married. As for Rose Red, she roams the world still, living a life of adventure. About the story. Snow White and Rose Red is a German fairy tale. It was written down by Caroline Stahl in 1818 in her collection of German fairy tales. She called the tale The Ungrateful Dwarf. Then two brothers, Jacob and William Grimm, included the story in their book of fairy tales, renaming it Snow White and Rose Red. It's unusual for a fairy tale, as it's about two sisters who love and help each other. In this version, there is also a new ending to reflect the times we live in. Well, I hope that you liked the story for today, and thank you for being with us, and see you next time.